My name is Susan Colbert. I am interviewing Thomas James Pokrefke, Jr. on August the 30th, 2021 at the Sparta Public Library in Sparta, Illinois. Welcome. How would you like me to refer to you as?
You can just call me Tom, it's fine.
Okay. Well, Tom, where were you born and when?
I was born in St. Louis, Missouri on July 10th, 1946, which happened to be my father's 30th birthday.
Who were your parents and what were their occupations?
My father was Thomas James Pokrefke, Sr. He was a pipe fitter, but for a while he actually owned a hardware store in Oakville, Missouri, which is a suburb of St. Louis. And my mother was a hairdresser, and she kind of just did that on a side job. Her name was Rose Schweer Pokrefke.
Did you have siblings?
I have three sisters. My oldest sister, Janet, is 3 years older than me. My brother's 6 years younger than me. And then we had twin sisters that are 10 years younger than me.
Were any of them in the military?
My brother was in the Air Force in 1970, I think 1970 to 1973.
And you grew up in St. Louis?
I grew up in St. Louis, yes ma'am.
What schools did you attend?
I attended Lindbergh High School in Sappington, Missouri, and then I went to the University of Missouri at Rolla for a civil engineering degree. Graduated, went from 64 to 68. And then in 1975, 76, I went to Colorado State University where I got a master's degree in civil engineering.
Did you like school?
I did.
What did you enjoy doing in your youth?
There was 3 or 4 of us in the neighborhood, and we just all knocked around together. We played wiffle ball. We messed with go-karts and motorbikes and stuff like that. Just things that probably nowadays you get in trouble for doing, but being boys, we were boys.
What did you enjoy did you enjoy sports?
I enjoyed sports, but when I was in 7th grade, which it ended up haunting me pretty well for the rest of my life, I was shot in the eye with a BB. So there were certain sports like football or water polo I couldn't play because of the damage I had done to my eye.
What were you doing before you joined the service?
In June of '68, after I graduated from Rolla and my wife Lynn and I got married, we moved to Vicksburg, Mississippi, and I went to work for the Corps of Engineers. There's a big research center in Vicksburg. And I went to work there in June of 1968 doing hydraulic model studies and working with rivers and just hydraulic type things.
In what year did you join the service?
I was drafted in December of 1969.
How long did you serve?
I was in active duty for 2 years and inactive for 4 years.
Where were you living when you joined the service?
We were living in Vicksburg. I got my draft notice right before Thanksgiving and moved my wife, Lynn, and our oldest daughter, Jackie, moved her back to St. Louis to be with her parents. And then I went into the Marine Corps on December 3rd, 1969.
How old were you when you joined?
I was 23.
Did you enlist or were you drafted?
I was drafted in the Marine Corps. Not a whole lot of people were drafted into the Marine Corps.
Why was that?
When you're drafted into the armed services of the United States. And when I arrived, there was several of us. We were inducted. I didn't know any of them in St. Louis, but we were told that 4 of us were going into the Marine Corps that day, and an Air Force colonel called out 4 names after we got done with the physical and all that, and mine was one of the names.
How did you feel about going into the Marines as opposed to the Army?
I really had hoped to go into the Army because if I went into the Army that at that time of the year, I'd have gone to Fort Leonard Wood, and I would have gotten to come home for Christmas. Well, going to the Marine Corps, I got sent to San Diego, California, and there was no coming home for Christmas. I tell everybody, it wasn't, at the time, I didn't think it was going to be too good a deal, but it's an experience I'd never want to trade for anything.
Before joining, had you ever thought about serving in the military?
I actually had. In my senior year in high school, I applied for to go to Annapolis, the military academy, at Navy Military Academy. And I went through all the examinations, everything, and at the physical, they saw the damage I had done to my eye, and it was over and done with. I couldn't go into the Navy, at least as an officer.
What happened when you departed for training?
Well, believe it or not, I was 23 years old, but that's the first time I'd ever been on an airplane. I flew from St. Louis to San Diego, and showed up in San Diego it was probably pretty close to midnight when we got there, and went through all that rigmarole, getting your hair cut and giving you your clothes and putting everything I had, personal items, was put in a box with and sent back home. And it was just kind of a complete separation from my family, from Lynn and Jackie, and it was kind of traumatic at the time, for sure.
What happened during your early days of training?
First, 8 weeks of training, just early on, doing a lot of physical things. One thing in the Marine Corps, one thing you have to do is you have to know how to swim. Well, I'd done a lot of swimming when I was a kid, so everybody in our company had to swim, I don't know, 3 laps or whatever. And if you could swim 3 laps, you got to do other things. Otherwise, they kept making sure you could swim, because if you're in the Marine Corps, you're probably going to end up on a Navy ship sometime, and you better know how to swim if something happens to the ship.
Do you recall your instructors?
I don't recall them by name. I can see their faces and I can hear their voices from time to time, and it's kind of interesting. For 6-8 weeks, they're hollering at you, screaming at you, telling you you're lower than anything else in the world and you're junk. And but this kind of really changed my life in the Corps of Engineers. The day I graduated from boot camp, I was promoted from private to PFC, which just a certain number get promoted. Well, when I was going into graduation, one of the drill instructors came up to me and he said, as soon as you're going to go up on the stage and you're going to get promoted and come down from the stage, he said, when you come down, he said, I'm going to be there. He said, I want you to catch me. And he said, I don't want you to talk to anybody. I don't want you to look at anybody. If the Commandant of the Marine Corps is there, you don't say anything to him. So I did that. And after graduation, he took me outside. And this is a guy that had been hollering at me and screaming. And I mean, he was just as nice as a person could be. And what had happened was my father-in-law was killed that day. And they were going to send me home for his funeral. If he would have been killed the day before or the day after, everything else would have changed. But for some reason, they let me go home for an in-law, which is kind of a rule that Marine Corps doesn't live by. So I got to go home for his funeral. And at the time I graduated from boot camp, my MOS, my job in the Marine Corps was to be a machine gunner. And I had orders all the way to Vietnam coming out of boot camp. But when I came back from the funeral, I had to wait for the next rotation because everybody else I was with was long gone, a week or so anyway. And while I was waiting, they changed my MOS, my job, from machine gunner to a topographic surveyor. So that was my job once I got out of, we have to go to advanced training. They call it ITR, Infantry Training Regiment, because every Marine has to learn how to shoot mortars and all the different weapons that a Marine could run into. And after that, then I was sent to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. That was a long answer for a short question.
I liked that answer. Told us a lot. What did you think of basic training?
For me, it was hard physically because, I was 23 years old. Basically, everybody I was with was 17, 18 years old. They had just gotten out of high school. And I was probably a little bit overweight and out of shape a little bit. But on the flip side of that, and I've always looked at it this way, to me, boot camp was 90% psychological and 10% physical. And those 17 and 18 years old, it worked in their heads. They thought they were going to, the drill instructor would say, "I'm going to kill you in the morning," and they'd believe it. And he's not going to kill you. It's just not going to happen. It's just the way it is. But physically, one thing I did learn though, because we had one or two guys were about my age, but one guy had really bad, I can't remember if it was knees or ankles, and couldn't run at all. But as a platoon, we figured out if we got that guy in formation with us and just run, he would continue to run because people won't quit when there's somebody around them. And that was really something I learned in that particular environment that really has stuck with me all my life.
How did you adapt to the physical regimen of military life?
It was hard at first, but I guess as weeks went on, I got in better and better shape, and by the end, it was no problem at all.
What did you think about living in the barracks? It was kind of interesting because, I guess there was about 70 or 80 of us in one room, basically. And, but you had to kind of look out for one another to make sure everything was okay. It was, when I was in college, I lived with four people, but this was like 40 or 50 people, so you just get used to it. And my snoring probably bothered as many people as their snoring bothered me. How was the food?
The food was was good, or acceptable, I guess would be a better way of putting it. Certain things like gravy on biscuits and stuff I don't like, but they're some, they give you lots of vegetables, which makes sense what they're what you're doing in training, and the drill instructors, if they thought you were overweight, they'd keep an eye on you to make sure you didn't get too much food.
Mm-hmm. Did you get any free time during boot camp?
I went in on the 3rd of December, it was 69. The only day on Christmas morning, we did something till about noon. And then the drill instructors brought in a TV, and we got to watch a football game that afternoon. And that was a whole break we had. No other breaks. And I don't know how it is in other boot camps in Army or Air Force, but we never went to the PX unless the whole company went to the PX, and you went in to get shaving cream or soap or whatever you got. You didn't get to get any what they call pogey bait. No candy, nothing like that. Just essentials to keep yourself clean and groomed, and that was it. And every time we went to the PX, with the exception after graduation, those guys did get to go to the PX and get a Coke or something like that.
What was the worst part of boot camp?
Worst part for me was being away from my family, and I think maybe we got to make, in that 6 weeks, maybe we got to make 1 or 2 phone calls, but if we did, they were short. It was like 2 or 3 minutes, and then that was it. Just missing my family was the biggest thing.
Did you receive any specialized training?
Not really.
And where did you serve?
After boot camp, which was in the recruit depot in San Diego, I went to Camp Pendleton in California for infantry training regiment, and then after that I was transferred to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and I was there the whole time from about April of 1970 till I got out in December of 71.
How did you travel between your locations?
That time I traveled commercial air to St. Louis to pick up Lynn and Jackie, and then we drove from St. Louis to Camp Lejeune.
Did you serve abroad?
No, I never really served abroad.
What kind of friendships did you form while serving, and with whom?
The company I was put in was Second Topo Company, which I don't even think Second Topo Company exists anymore. I think it was folded into some other organization. But there was about 50 of us in the company, and 40 of us were graduate engineers who graduated from engineering school all over the place, Texas, Virginia, North Dakota. So that was our training. They already had us trained. We knew how to. We were in a topographic company which does surveys. We survey the ground, or survey beaches, or survey oceans, and so we all had a common thread. That we were all, most of us were just actually registered engineers in whatever state we came from, and because of that, you didn't really have to we spent a fair amount of time having fun because we didn't have to spend a lot of time training.
What kind of fun did you have?
Mainly drinking beer. being in North Carolina, a lot of us would go to the beaches together. The Camp Lejeune has some really nice beaches. There are some really good restaurants where you get good seafood, and sometimes we go to the Naval Air Station and go crabbing and get crabs and bring them home and boil them and have a crab cook. So just do most all the couples, most of the guys in the company with me were married, and several of us had kids, so we just kind of interacted all together.
Did you stay in touch with family and friends back home during that time?
Yep. A couple times when I went out on different tours, Lynn would go home with Jackie. She'd either fly home or ride home with somebody and spend time. And my wife had a twin sister, and her husband was in the service at the same time, so they were always talking back and forth. My mom and dad would contact us probably, if not once a week, probably once every other week, something like that, on the phone. And they came and visited us probably 2 or 3 times when we were in North Carolina.
I think you've already answered this question, but what did you do for recreation or when you were off duty?
Just had fun. Probably the first 3 or 4 months I was there, we actually were doing a lot of night work. And so we'd go in at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we'd work till 6 o'clock in the morning, come back, turn all of our equipment in, go home, and then we'd have the whole afternoon. We could go to the beach, do whatever we wanted to do with our family.
Did you ever attend a USO show?
I never did, never.
Did you have contact with civilians? How did they treat you?
If I had contact with civilians, it would have been somebody at the auto parts store or something like that, and I can't imagine it being anything but respectful to me.
Did you ever meet or see anyone famous?
No.
Did you ever meet any POWs?
I never did, no ma'am.
What did you think of the people you served with?
They were, like I said, out of 50 of us, 40 of us were engineers, and they were all really good engineers. They knew their stuff. You could depend on them. The other 10 people were either our commander or the staff under him, or the motor pool people or people like that, and they were all top-notch people. Our commanding officer was a warrant officer, and then he had 2 or 3 captains underneath him, but all those guys that were captains had actually been enlisted people, and they were what they called Mustang during the Vietnam War. They were raised in grade from an NCO to an officer. And then, as a matter of fact, about the time I was getting out, a lot of them started going back to their non-commissioned officer rank. And so they were all good surveyors. They knew what they needed to do, and our commander, our warrant officer, every time we had a job to do, he said, here's a job, go do it, and if you need something, let me know, otherwise I'm not going to bug you. And he did. And there was one of the places we went to was in, I think, June of 1970, we went to Mayaguana, which is the southernmost Bahamian island, and he went with us, and he he stayed in the barracks the whole time. We were out surveying and working day in and day out. And if we needed something, we knew where he was. But other than that, he'd never bother us.
What were your commanding officers like? And I think you've already explained that.
Super.
What was the highest rank you ever achieved?
Sergeant, E5.
What were your duties there? Any different?
No, you just kind of worked your way up. When we first started out, when we were doing all that night survey, for some reason, I've always written small numbers and stuff and letters. And so they had me recording everything, all these, we were taking Polaris shots and doing really high-ordered surveys for the Marine Corps. And so I was a recorder, so anything we did, I printed everything, and because of that, I still tend to print everything. But and then as time went on, I became a survey team leader, and then new people came in, and they took over our job.
Did you ever have to change jobs or do a job that you weren't trained in?
No, we. Like I said, anything we did was probably 3/4 of it I learned when I was in school.
What part of your job did you least enjoy?
I really couldn't say that there was anything I guess least enjoy. Maybe sometimes we'd have to go out at night when the weather was really cruddy, and you almost knew you were wasting your time going out. But they said, well, maybe it'll clear up. If we went out at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, then maybe you'll clear up by 10 o'clock and you can get some work in. That'd be the worst thing. Oh, and the other thing, and I still remember this, whenever we were doing beach surveys in Camp Lejeune, in the wintertime, that was, and I still say it today, that's the coldest I've ever been, with that wind blowing off the ocean and the cold humidity. It was nasty.
What was your most memorable experience while serving?
I think the most memorable was, besides getting out, probably working with a lot of good people and getting to go to places that a lot of people never get to go to.
What was your most frightening experience?
I would have to say there a couple times we were flying with Marine Corps pilots on helicopters, and they can scare you if they really want to. They can get your attention.
What was your most exhausting experience?
When I guess the fall of 1970, we went to Camp Garcia in Vieques, Puerto Rico. We were doing a survey for some beach area that the Marine Corps was going to use for practice landings and stuff. And I think there was probably about 20 of us went down there. Well, of the 20, only 3 of us didn't get seasick doing the surveys. So every day, 7 days a week, we were the ones doing the work, because everybody else got sick when they got we were in a landing craft. that the Navy had provided, and with the fumes and everything blowing around, like I said, I think it was 3 of us never did get sick, but everybody else did. So we got to work all the time.
Do you have any funny memories?
One of the things when we went to Mayaguana, there was 4 of us. We stayed on the beach 24 hours a day. Everybody else, there was an old Air Force barracks there, and they stayed in the Air Force barracks. But we stayed on the beach and to keep up with the equipment and everything. So the island, Mayaguana, if it was habited, we never saw anybody, any people from there. But one evening, some guy came up on a boat, and he said he had some beer for us, and if we wanted to buy it. It was a case of beer. It was called Fix Beer, F-I-X-X. It was a Greek beer, and it was terrible. But, I mean, here we are, 4 Marines out on the beach for I think we were there for 3 or 4 weeks, and boy, we had some beer to drink. So we dug a hole and stuck it down where it would kind of get cold in the sand during the day, and then drink it at night. But boy, it was like drinking burnt molasses. And I still can remember that taste.
Where were you when your period of service was up?
When I was up, when we got out, I was still in Camp Lejeune.
How did you return home?
Drove home. Drove back to St. Louis with Lynn and Jackie, and then we picked up the few things we had left at her parents' house, and then we moved back to Vicksburg, Mississippi.
How were you received by your family and community?
Just fine.
And how did you adjust to civilian life?
Pretty quick, because really, the whole time I was in the service, I was doing engineering work. It's not like I was jumping out of planes or something completely different. And a lot of the experience I had in the Marine Corps I could use in the job when I came back to working for the Corps of Engineers.
What was your first job after discharge?
I went back to my position. I was a research hydraulic engineer at Waterways Experiment Station in Vicksburg, and I just went back to that job.
What was the biggest surprise about civilian workplace?
For me, the people that had retired while I was gone, and the people, there was I was gone for 2 years, give or take, and it was almost like there was a whole new batch of people came in, and that was also, if you look at what was going on in the world, that was, I got out in 71. That was the time that computers and things like that started getting bigger and bigger. And so all these things that we had done manually or with the old mechanical calculators wasn't done anymore. It was done with computers.
Have you remained in contact with or reunited with fellow veterans?
I have not, much to my chagrin. Again, I think all of us being engineers and being from all over the country, we just went back to our old way of life and went on from there.
Are you a member of any veterans organizations?
No, ma'am.
What have you done since separating from the military? And I think you've already answered that too. You went back to your job.
Yeah, I went back to a job, and I ended up working there for almost, counting the 2 years in the Marine Corps, I worked almost 40 years there.
Did you retire from that job?
Yes, in 2004.
Do you have hobbies?
I do. I love to work on old cars, and I like working outside, cutting grass, trimming bushes, doing whatever. The more I can be outside, the happier I am.
How did your service experiences affect your life?
I think it made me realize how important, one, education is, because without the education, I would have never gotten the job I got, and I'd have been somewhat place else. And that you can really, I got drafted in the Marine Corps. People say, "Oh gosh, what'd you do wrong to do that?" But for me, like I said earlier, it's an experience I wouldn't trade. It just made me a different, and I think a better person.
What key knowledge, skills, abilities, and experiences that you learned from military service would you say are the most valuable?
I think being aware of, I went to, like I said, Mayaguana. I went to Camp Garcia in Vieques, Puerto Rico. Went to Guantanamo Bay. We did a whole series of surveys on Cape Hatteras and in North Carolina, and just learning about different places and different things. I still remember when we were in Guantanamo Bay. Our job was we had to survey in all of the Cuban towers and machine gun nests. Of course, we couldn't go over there to do it. We had to do it so we had kind of they let us go pretty well anywhere we wanted us, except they told us where all the minefields were. But the thing I still remember is, and I would have never guessed it, but every morning there was there was a group of Cubans would come into Guantanamo Bay, and they were house cleaners and things like that, and carpenters, whatever. They worked all day long, and then at the end of the day, they went back home to Cuba. And I would have never thought things like that. You hear about other things like that nowadays, and yeah, it does happen.
How has your military service impacted your feelings about war and the military in general?
I have a respect for sure for non-commissioned officers, NCOs, the ones that are clogging their way through the mud and stuff, and I like to see as much as possible that the officers and things that are in the Army or the Corps or Air Force, that they're taking their jobs seriously, and that they're putting the country and their troops at the top of their list for their priorities.
What message would you like to leave for future generations who will view this interview?
Just be true to this country, support it. It's you hear it every day. It's not the best place. It's not perfect, but it's sure that one of the best places to be. And I can't imagine being anywhere else in the world other than in the United States of America.
Is there anything you feel we haven't discussed or should be added to this interview?
Not that I know of, no ma'am.
Well, this concludes our interview. Thank you for taking part in it, and thank you for your service.
Thank you.